Yeah, so next we're going to have a speaker who is insistent on talking about sports at a school that doesn't care about them at all. Leo Kupperman is going to talk about, also one last thing. When you guys walk for the intermission, make sure to not go, don't touch the art. Just try not to hit the art. But stay away, don't go near the art. It's expensive stuff. Okay, so Leo's going to talk about sports or theater. So give him a round of applause.
All right. What up? My name's Leo. This is my talk. Sports or theater? Kind of. Sports and theater, they look kind of different. They generally have somewhat different audiences, but I think actually it's fairly easy to convince oneself that they're pretty similar. And they're the same in the sense that they bring people together to watch a story unfold. In sports, the story is manufactured by the rules of the game, while in theater it's usually written out. And in these stories, conflict drives the plot. And what's important is that this conflict is not real, but rather it's a representation of something real that's being portrayed on a stage for an audience with a lot of ritual around it. But even with this understanding, there are definitely some important differences, and these are general differences. And one of them is that sports is generally improvised, as in you don't know, the outcome is not predetermined, whereas theater is more planned. And I think that this makes them have different conceptions of time for the audience experience them. And I argue that this difference in conception of time makes the people watching sports much more emotionally and viscerally invested, while in theater, the ability to plan gives you a larger range of stories. Because sports is often compared to war, whereas in theater, there's much more you can do with it. And I argue that despite this, we still can't help but think of one as the other. And one good illustrative example of this, I think, is WWE. Is anyone a fan of WWE here? I'm not a fan of WWE, but I do think that it's a weird cross of sports and theater because it has the veneer of sports while it is totally fake and scripted. And there's a cool example that shows this difference, and that's the Montreal Screwjob. So on the left you have Bret Hart, on the right you have Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart is sort of a hero character at this time, it is 1997, whereas Shawn Michaels is more of a villain. And then the guy who runs it all is Vince McMahon in the middle. So this dude is leaving WWE for a different wrestling organization, and he has the belt, though, so he needs to give up the belt, but he doesn't want to give up the belt in Canada because he's from Canada. So he's going to give it up at a later time, but Vince McMahon thinks this is not a great idea, so he goes behind the back of Bret Hart and scripts it so that Shawn Michaels wins the match. And not only was this shocking to the fans who were expecting Bret Hart to go out on top, but it was also shocking to Bret Hart because he wasn't aware that it was scripted so that he would lose. So in this moment when he loses, you get this punch through of reality in this totally ridiculous fake experience. And I think that sort of juxtaposes the theater, which is totally fake and planned, or this versus sports, which yes is fake, but it's not planned. And I think this difference is a difference in time. So the way that I think of sports as sports time being conceptualized is like a set of diverging paths. You can go down a path, you can choose different paths, you can sort of see where they're going to lead, but you don't really know where they're going to lead. Whereas I would think of theater more like a roller coaster. There's lots of sort of interesting stuff that can happen in a roller coaster. It's very exciting, but eventually you know you're going to come around to the start. And this is not to say that when you're experiencing a play or a movie for the first time, yes, you don't really know what's going to happen, but you know someone made the things happen beforehand. Whereas in sports, you truly don't know what path you're going to take. And this, I think, has a big effect on the fans. So I argued that the improvised nature of sports, it has the effect of heightening the stakes for the fans. And not only does it heighten the stakes for the fans, it actually makes the fans part of the story itself that's being told. Because the fans, in theater, there is walls. There's 3 walls, and there's usually a 4th wall. Usually is interesting in its own right. But in sports, there aren't really these walls. You're expected, you should be yelling at the players. You should be yelling at the refs. You should be making as much noise as possible. You should be trying to get your team to win. And people recognize this, like bettors recognize this. The home field advantage in football is 3 points. And sometimes this emotion that you put into it, because you're trying to get your team to win, and you're part of the story, when you do finally win, sometimes the fans will rush the court. And I think this is just representative of how much the fans feel that they're a part of the players. They just want to be physically close to the players. And sometimes an even more rare thing happens. Because of these emotions, sometimes the players rush the fans. And this is an event known as the Malice at the Palace. It was actually really terrible and a big thing in NBA history. Also, he got the wrong guy. The right guy was in blue and sort of like pushed him into the other. I don't know. But it gets even crazier. Sometimes the fans will riot. This is a terrible and fairly common thing, actually. This one is from 2011. Vancouver lost the Stanley Cup to Boston, and for some reason that means that Vancouver had to burn. And that sort of sounds crazy on its face, but I think this way of the fans are part of the story. And so when the stakes are built so high over the entire season, and then you lose on the Game 7, it ignites something in people, and it makes people do crazy things. But those crazy things don't include spelling the word fuck. And this was a real riot. I mean, this caused real damage. There's awesome pictures of this riot. But I think like the amazing sort of stuff that happens, it's actually explained by the structure. So also, a more like positive way. This I think just shows the lengths fans are willing to go. They're willing to kind of dress up in silly outfits and cross-dress in order to support their team. And the way these fans look, in theater, also people cross-dress a lot, but it's usually just the performers. And I think the fact that the fans are willing to do this shows that they believe themselves to be performers. So overall, the experience and time in sports and theater is definitely a structure of is definitely a product of how their structures are different. And I think this leads to different ways that audiences interact with the performers, with the players. However, it's impossible not to see the other way. So in a theater performance in a movie, you might know exactly what's going to happen, or at least you know that it's going to be predetermined, that you have no effect, but you might still find yourself yelling at the TV that this character should do something different. Whereas in sports, it's a super common thing to be like, the script writers are at it again. They've outdone themselves this time. And it's just really hard for us as humans, and I don't know exactly what this says about humans, to think about stories as anything but just that. That there's some sort of arc to them, and we just sort of impose this on sports. And then sports respond, and they give us stuff to be entertained about. And so, I don't know, I would just say that at the end of the day, it just comes down to how are we experiencing these stories. And that's why I think that sports are theater. Thank you.